Hi everyone, my name is Tom, and I am a senior software engineer at Google, and I am also an Exponent coach. So today I'm here to present you some ideas about how to ace your engineering interviews. So first of all, who am I, and why do I have to sit here and listen to this guy? Right. So I graduated from Peking University from China to obtain my bachelor degree before I came to University of Maryland and obtained my PhD degree in computer engineering. And then after I graduate my graduation, I came to Silicon Valley and got my first job in chip design automation. And then I switched to Google, and shortly after that, I joined Exponent to become a career coach there. Um, so I have so sorry. So far, this is my third year in a row that I am having this university tour workshop across the top most prestigious universities in the United States and try to broadcast information that how do we use existing resources online and what's the best way for us to be successful in technical interviews. And I have been I have been served as a job interviewer for many years. I have held more than 500 plus interviews slash mock interview sessions with candidates or with students. I have more than 300 plus direct clients that work with me for interview excellence, and I'm here happy to be here to help you folks. So I am a backend software engineer. So my role, let me see if I can get the laser right. So my role uh, involves designing and build like server-side logic of applications. I work with databases, API, and system architectures a lot. My mission is to ensure the system is reliable, scalable, and highly performant. Right? And I listed some of the pros and cons for being a backend and software engineer. And then we will naturally drifting towards some other roles I am familiar with, since I have worked with many different engineers in different organizations. So I have some knowledge about how these roles look like and what are the pros and cons for each of these roles. For backend software engineer, so definitely it's one of the most the roles with the highest demand on the market. So I have pretty good like a career stability. However, the backend software engineer roles often involves in debugging quite complicated, large distributed systems. And it can have like on-call duties, and it can have like a production pressures from time to time, right? And then I have to keep up with the ever-evolving frameworks and tools on the market. How about other roles? So let me introduce some of the other roles I have interacted with, although personally I haven't been in those roles yet. But I guess like for the sake of the students, for the sake of the audience of this workshop, it might give you guys some ideas about what these roles look like so that you can make a better choice once you're ready to do that. For machine learning engineers, right? So they are the ones who bridges between data scientists and software engineers, right? Their mission is to design and build and deploy AI-powered applications, right? So one of the pros for being an ML engineer is you have the opportunity to work on cutting-edge AI applications, right? And one of the cons of being an ML engineers is you have to endure very long experimentation cycles, right? Compared to a typical traditional software engineer, where you can usually use, like, for example, unit test, a very quick testing method to verify whether your approach works or not. But this is not true for machine learning engineers. You have to train a model, you have to fine tune a model, you have to evaluate a model, which typically takes on order of weeks for you to converge and to tell whether the method, the experiment you are working on is good or not. And how about SREs, site reliability engineers, right? So their roles is to ensure a reliable, scalable, and performance system. And they also want to automate the process to reduce the manual work, right? So one of the pros for being a site SRE is their work is extremely impactful, right? It's not surprising for like site reliability engineer to write very short piece of code. However, the code can impact the life of thousands of engineers. One of the cons of being a SRE is typically this role involves on-call responsibilities. And when an incident happens, depending on the severity of the incident, the pressure can be huge, right? Especially in the case where the incidents have a very large blast radius. It affects, for example, affects every single engineer's productivity if some portion of the service is done. What about data engineers? Engineers, they have opportunity across many different industries, right? The role is very versatile and it is highly needed in many different industries. One of the cons is the data engineers work are often, behind the curtain kind of work. So compared to, for example, ML engineer or site reliability engineer, the data engineers might get a feeling that their work is less visible to external clients. How about PMs, product managers, right? This is a role that is very different from the technical roles we have discussed previously. This role is to define product vision, strategy, and roadmap, right? It is to ensure the product delivers its values to either the client or the customer, right? So one of the pros for being a product engineers, product managers, it offers, and you have to have cross-functional collaboration and leadership, right? You are going to influence many colleagues' daily life because you believe something is important, right? You're going to set goals, you're going to set milestones for them. You're going to be the glue so that many different engineers across different teams can work together towards a common goal. How about the cons? Well, like one of the cons I can see is like the job involves by default, the mission can be ambiguous, and it can have the role need to deal with conflicting priorities between different teams, right? So you have to, like a narrow out, you have to scope out what is necessary. The necessary things need to be done. What are the high priority items for different teams? And you have to persuade them. They have to drop low priority things in order to make sure the high priority items gets finished. So like this workshop is designed to be interactive. So while I'm talking, so I am going to keep an eye on the on our chat channel, and I'm going to ask you folks a few fun questions. So, so this is very classic like a coding interview problems. Many tech companies would love to ask during their coding interviews. So let's use this as a practice. The problem is called a two-sum problem. Given an array of integer numbers and integer target, return the indices of the two numbers such that they add up to target. Right. So for a quick example here is the input nums array is 3243 and target number is 6. So we are going to find the indices of the two numbers so that they add up to 6. So I'm going to pause here for 30 seconds so that the student, the audience here in this workshop can type in the chatting box, the chat box, what should be the return value for this particular example? I'm not looking for any specific code. I'm only looking for the return value for this particular input. Right? One and two. Thank you, George. Anybody else? Yeah, exactly. Yes, 0 and 3 or 1 and 2. Thank you. So maybe we're thinking, like I know what you want, right, Tom? I know, you're asking for a pair of indices that sum up to whose value sum up to 6. So I'm going to return you one, either 0 and 3 or 1 and 2. However, your interviewer might expect us to return all the possible combinations. In this case, as one of you have successfully identified, it can be either 0 and 3 and 1 and 2, right? So the takeaway for this slide is, we cannot make arbitrary assumptions by ourselves if we feel like the question is vague and we do not fully follow or understand what our interviewers are looking for, we better ask. We better ask as many as clarification questions as possible so that we do not have any vagueness in our understanding. Okay. So this is a general tech interview process for software engineers. This workshop will be biased towards software engineers because I am a software engineer. But I will be sure to blend in some of the other element for the other roles we have talked about. Um, to the best knowledge that I can, right? But for software engineers, like a typical tech interview process begins with an application, right? This application can be an online application, or it can be someone you connected on LinkedIn, or it can be somebody who when you are doing internship or you have met during your alumni event at your university, and those people say they can help with your application by doing you, for example, internal referral. And it's often the case like the company these days will dish out on the online assessment. Uh, and it typically involves, some problems we need to resolve, and it will probably get evaluated by a machine by checking whether your code passes all the test cases, right? Assuming we finished an online assessment, and then we go to the initial screening session, where our resumes is going to be reviewed by a human being The recruiters who are reviewed, the recruiters or the hiring manager who have reviewed our resume have decided that we are potentially a good match for the open position, right? And so they called us up and they say, hey, what is our graduation date? What is our interest, right? Are we open to relocation, so on and so forth, right? Assuming, can you please send us the recording later? Yeah, I would defer that question to Elaine, and I'll be sure to sending out the slides for today's session. Okay. And let's say, like we're invited for a technical phone interview, in which our interviewers, maybe this can be our future manager, or this can be our peer workers. They're going to ask us a technical question. This can be a behavior question, or this can be a coding question, or this can be a design question. And assuming we passed the initial technical phone screen, and they invited us to an on-site interviews. These days, even after the post pandemic, most of the on-site interviews are still conducted in a virtual format, which means you are going to talk to a camera the same way as I'm doing right now, right? And the on-site interview can be in any combination or mixture of code interview, object design interviews, system design interviews, or behavior interviews, right? Note that like object-oriented system, as object-oriented design interview is more like suitable for junior entry-level roles, and system design interviews are more for senior roles, meaning you will only get a system design interview uh, after you have at least 2 or 3 years of industry working experience. And after we go through all the process, we'll hopefully get some feedback from our recruiter. And in the best scenario, we landed on a wonderful offer. Okay. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the technical interview process, right? So first of all, like I want to introduce the concepts of interview rubrics, which means like what are we really evaluated at, right, for different roles, right? How are the grading rubrics look like for each of the different roles? Right. So this slides, for each of the slides, including this one and a few ones in the following slides, the spider diagram I'm showing right now introduces the multi-dimension grading metrics for each of the rows above. Right. So this slide shows you how a typical software engineer interviewer will grade us depending on different aspect of the interview. And if the point is further away from the center of the graph, it means like this particular concept is of higher weight, right? For example, algorithm and data structure interviews are very, very important for a software engineer, right? And for mid to senior roles, system design is also relevant. For junior interviews, for junior candidate, object-oriented design interview is relevant. Low-level design, for example, how do you design a CPU scheduler? However, its importance is relatively low compared to others. Machine learning, if the role involves ML, databases, and SQL, concurrency, behaviors. What about for ML engineers, right? We still have algorithm data structure. However, like that, its weight becomes less compared to a software engineer. We have the ML concepts. Those are the concepts you learned from your coursework or learned throughout the years through your projects. math and statistics, deep learning, ML system design for mid or senior roles, databases, SQL, domain knowledge, behavior interviews. What about for PMs? Um, we noticed that like a coding interviews is no longer in the scope, and it's replaced by product sense or design, right? For example, how do you design a chatting application, right? What's the success criteria? A product strategy. For example, how do you make sure a specific product hits the market, right? It will be well received by the market. What are the milestones to make this happen? Technical communication, because as a PM, you are going to be going to communicate with many different technical stakeholders a lot. So even if like you do not code by yourself, it is very important for our PM to deliver a task in a technical way so that like it's well received on the engineering side, right? Execution, analytical thinking. For example, if you are running Facebook, but Facebook's daily active users have been dropping in the last one month, what do we do? Right? So you have to, think really hard about like what kind of metrics, what kind of analytics you need to pull out so that you can draw a meaningful conclusion based on the numbers, and you can propose constructive feedback. Behavior interviews, go-to-market strategy, right? What are the steps so that we can deploy our product and make sure it provides value to our clients, right? Customer empathy, user research, cross-functional collaboration. Data science interviews, right? You will get algorithm data structure interviews. The focus is more on Python because Python is probably the most popular language if you are a data scientist. Um, Product metrics. What are the metrics to define the success of a product? Analytics, SQL becomes very, very important for data engineers and data scientists. Machine learning, if this role involves ML, probability and statistics, behaviors, A/B testings, which is one of the most popular tools to say, whether a feature worth our investment or a feature can be turned down or not. Okay. Before I move on to the next slides, which talk about like some more details about coding questions. Any questions so far regarding different roles, different rubrics, different questions we have discussed so far? Count on 10 seconds. All right, let's continue. So let's talk about like a coding questions a little bit more, right? So what makes a good coding question from an interview perspective? Um, a good coding question should reflect a candidate capability to understand the problem, right? So it should reflect whether a candidate have basic coding skills, whether they have the basic knowledge about algorithm and data structure, whether they can perform logical thinking process, and then they have the needed optimization skills to achieve, for example, the optimal time or space complexity, right? A coding question should be able to tell whether the candidate have the ability to analyze corner cases, whether they can analyze the coding complexity correctly, and when things go wrong, whether the candidate are able to debugged code, um, if there is any code, if there's any bug in their code. Right. So right now I'm going to talk about like a one or two common pitfalls in a typical coding interview. But let's begin this practice first, right? So let's look at the right hand side, and the interviewer is asking us to implement an in-order binary tree traversal, right? Um, in-order binary traversal should be covered. The concept should be covered in the data structure and algorithm 101 class. So for anybody who has a CS or computer engineering major, this shouldn't feel exotic. But like, can you guys like help with me if I'm going to do an in-order traversal, which basically means I'm going to the left tree first, and then go to the root, and then go to the right tree. What will be my printing order if I traverse the binary tree using an in-order traversal method? Wait for 10 seconds. George, 42513. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. There are two typical ways for us to do a binary tree in order traversal, right? One is using a recursive function call, or another one is to use iterative approach, right? So the recursive function call look like this. We'll traverse the left subtree. Let me use a pen so that we know we're looking at this one. Traverse the left subtree and visit the root, and then traverse the right subtree. Right. This is the skeleton of in-order traversal using a recursive function call. Another one is we can use an iterative approach, right? We can write an iterative approach by leveraging an auxiliary data structure of a stack, right? Um, George asks, which one should we use for an interview? Will they appreciate more of an iterative approach or a recursion approach? Great question. So I think like many interviews, they do not have a strong opinion on which one to use. So you are actually free to choose any one of that. However, there are a small portion of the interviewers, they prefer the iterative approach, right? Um, for the reason that like in an industry job, like recursion is really used because it is hard to debug a recursive function call, right? So iterative approach might be slightly more appreciated, but I think like the best suggestion here, if you are seeking for one, is to ask your interviewer, I have these two approach, right? And I can write both, but do you have any hard constraint on which one I should use, right? Otherwise, I'm going to choose one uh, uh, based on how I feel about it. And I can make the argument even stronger by saying, hey, I want to choose the recursive function because it is easier for me to write a recursive function call. Or I can say I want to use iterative approach because I feel like iterative approach is easier for me to debug and it's easier for me to perform the complexity analysis, right? I think like both arguments are valid arguments, and it would be very nice if you can elaborate the pro and cons of these choices, and then choose one, propose one, and see whether the interviewer oppose or support your proposal. Okay. Hopefully this helps. The point I'm trying to make for this slide is, we all know that regardless of which approach we would choose, the in order tree uh, traversal would take O of n time complexity and O of n space complexity, right? But occasionally there might be a brilliant candidate who say, "Hey, Tom, I know there is another traversal algorithm called a Morse traversal. They can optimize my space complexity from O of n to O of 1, right? And I'm going to implement that, right? So don't do that, right? This is an over optimization of the solution. And the risk here is number one, the more traversal actually mutate the input tree, right? Meaning, the pointers from the root to the child of tree will be changed, and whether or not this is allowed is unknown, right? And secondly, we already have a good enough solution. And why do we need to, spend our time and risk ourselves by implementing something that is less famous, but more risky, right? So the best strategy here is to, pause and then checking in with our interviewer to say whether further optimization is needed. Okay. Um, okay. The second common pitfall I want to talk about is, like once in a while, this might be our lucky day, right? This might be a day where our hard work pays off. We have encountered exactly the same problem as I practiced before, right? So the question we are struggling with is, should we tell our interviewer, uh, I've seen this problem, right? So my take is you do not have to tell your interviewer unless another interviewer from the same company has just asked you the same question, right? At the end of the day, they do talk. So you don't want to end up with a situation where they figure out they have asked you the same question. But usually, right, you do not want to trust your memory because there might be variation in the constraint of the input, the corner cases of the problem, the input and output format of the problem, or the problem just looks similar, but they are inherently very different problems, right? So my suggestion here is to treat every single problem in the interview as if you have never seen them before, right? Treat as if they are fresh, new problems to you, and then try to solve the problem one by one, step by step, maybe from a brute force approach to a more advanced approach to eventually to an optimized solution and demonstrate your thinking process. Some more coding interview tips, examples, right? I cannot emphasize this enough. Use examples to eliminate misunderstandings. Use examples to illustrate ideas, right? And use examples as test cases to test your code. Complex analysis, right? This involves time and space complexity, and be sure to perform complex analysis proactively and use complexity analysis to drive optimization. Maintain a healthy workflow, right? Do not jump back and forth between thinking about an idea and implementing an idea. In many failure cases, the candidate try to improve the code while they are writing the code, right? We only have one brain, and we'd better just focus on one task at a time. Think about the architect overall good approach, and think about whether we need to optimize the original approach before we jump into a coding implementation, right? The coding implementation should be a strict reflection of the ideas we have agreed on, we have proposed before. Listen and be ready to take hints, right? This is especially true for high profile students. They have their own ego and they want to, they want to drive the discussion from end to end. They want to finish the solution by themselves without any hints. So, however, the only reason, that your interviewer jump in and provide you a hint is because they feel we are at a risk of not being able to deliver the interview on time, or we are on a completely wrong path. So they want to, reroute us a little bit. So when this happens, pause for a little bit and then listen and be ready to take hints. Be calm. We have multiple rounds. Even if we blow up one of them, it's not the end of the world. Ask for a different question in the worst case. Interviews can have many different personal styles, so we cannot really judge them based on their facial expressions on whether they like us or not, or judge based on their facial expressions or gestures whether we are taking the correct approach or not. Let me check the time if we have time to cover the whole design. I think so. So this case study is for object-oriented design. However, I want to make the discussion more generic. So even if like folks are not familiar with the whole design concept, can get something from the slides, right? So the whole design question typically asks the candidate to design something, to design a system. For example, design an elevator system for a building. Um, Rather than, jumping into the design details, let's try to ask, what are the good clarification questions, right? So number one question I can ask is, is this elevator designed for transporting passengers or is it designed for goods, right? Are we talking about like multiple elevators in one story or like our own whole building only have one elevator? When a request button is pressed, right? How many elevators respond to that request? Is it all of them or is it a subset of them, right? And what are inside the elevator, right? Is this an elevator, an old-fashioned elevator? There is an elevator operator, or this is more like a modern, like a self-service elevator. There's nobody besides the passengers in the elevator. When I push a button in the opposite direction, does the elevator respond to my request? For example, if the elevator goes up, however, I want to go to the bottom floor. Can I make the elevator change their mind? Right? These are all the good clarification questions we would love to ask before we dive into the design details. Right? These clarification, that the principle of asking clarification question is not limited to object-oriented design. It also a similar concept can be applied to a coding design, a coding session, and a system design session as well. Okay. Interview is a two-way street, right? So what your interviewer is thinking about is number one, can you get your job done? Right? Are you independently enough to get things done? Are you going to crash everything on your first day of job? If you write many bugs, if you miss many corner cases, if your testing methodology is flaky, then they won't have a very high confidence in you, right? How much effort do they need to spend to review your code? If you maintain a good coding style, right? If your code have necessary comments, that means for them, it's a good sign, it's a good signal that your coding production might have a good might be in a good shape, so they do not need to spend a lot of time review your code. Are they a person who are easy to work with, right? Do you take hints? Can you explain things well, right? However, as a job candidate, we also need to consider a few things, right? Number one, does my interviewer know the problem at all? When things go wrong, do I have enough support? This might be a signal whether the company advocates more for independence or they advocate more for culture of collaboration. how restrict are the coding review process? If my interviewer is requesting many items on my coding style, right? Maybe the company is emphasizing on the robustness of the code of the system rather than the time to market, as this is very common in a startup style company. Do they appreciate my code? Right? Is the position a good fit for me? And how much bargaining? This is very important. How much bargaining do I have when I negotiate my offer? Right? If they like me, if they appreciate my code, chances are, I can negotiate up for my offer uh, when time is ready. Okay. Right. So some general practice tips. Be mindful about time. We only have maybe 45 or 1 hour of time in a real job interview. So be mindful. And sometimes we have to make very tough decisions when we are running out of time. Uh, Focus on meeting level common problems. Practice taking hints for harder problems, right? Doing mock interview. This is really, really important, right? I can guarantee you folks almost for sure, like this applies to every single one of us, including myself. The first time we went into a job interview, we are going to blow it, right? So make sure we have sufficient mock interviews, and so that like the first time we blow it up, that only happens in our mock interviews, right? Lastly, interviews can be a very exhausting process. So when possible, break the interview into multiple days. Okay, so last, right, great. So we have 16 minutes left. So this is a great time for us for me to introduce some of the features on Exponent, so that you can leverage these features, which I believe has been made free of charge to all of you students as a Cornell student. So Exponent have a lot of interview preparation courses for almost every tech role, from product manager, from software engineers, from data scientists, analytics, solution engineers, so on and so forth. So you can browse through these courses and then pick whatever is the best fit for you. It has many practice problems, and you can and the problems might be in different coding languages, and the problems have like a video solutions, comments on them. And over the years, Exponent have established a community where the people can refresh can refresh these questions and answers and add more discussions onto it. So you can basically filter these questions by the roles of the companies, and you can further sort it by trending, newest, or most common problems. Mock interviews, right? So this is one of the most powerful features I found on Exponent. So basically, you can join 1,000 people across the world who are practicing interviews together. And then the platform is going to suggest questions, and it has solution templates for you to use so that one time one of you can become the interviewer and one guy can be the candidate, and next time you reverse the roles, right? And then you give each other grades based on what the platform offers you, right? So this, give us a pretty good like a practice in terms of how do we communicate with a real person, how do we get rid of the initial nerve in the interview process, so on and so forth. And I say it's a good starting point, with the caveat that like you are paired with somebody who you don't know, and they are basically interviewer, sorry, like a candidate preparing for interviews. So maybe the feedback you're getting is not standardized or it's not qualified enough, right? But regardless, it's still good practice. And so you can practice with other folks to get better. Lastly, if you guys haven't done this already, you can do so by today by visit tryexponent.com/login, and then you can choose login with your university, or try to visit the other link at tryexponent.com/ I believe the suffix here is just Cornell. Yep. Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Elaine. Um, yeah, so I think this brings me to the end of today's workshop. So this tryexponent.com/workshop is basically the feedback forms I need to collect from you folks, so that I know, whether you find this workshop useful or not, or whether we should continue to facilitate such workshops in the following future years to come. And I include my own communication channel here, so that, like, if you have a question you want to discuss with me in private, feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so I'll end here, and the session is now open to questions, and I keep an eye on the meeting chat. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, happy to be here. Um, Yeah, what is your advice for nerves? I would say, first of all, like, practice makes perfect, right? And I think, like, a lot of the initial nerve we can overcome is to talk to a real person, whether this real person is maybe a roommate, maybe a classmates, or maybe a friend, or maybe a career coach, right? By talking to a real person, for example, and then when answering the question they throw out to you, and then asking clarification question and communicating with them, it's a really good practice to get some exposure of what it will be look like in the real interview process, so that the moment you enter interview, you feel more familiar with the process, right? And then, of course, like, there are other ways for you to, physically overcome some of the nerves, and everybody have their own method. But my general advice is, drink a lot of water, keep hydrated, have a good rest before your interview date, so that you become active and energetic. And for me, I chew gums. Sometimes I throw myself onto the walls. You throw my shoulders onto the walls to release some of the pressure. But like, many people have, everyone have different ways to release some of the pressure and nerves. Yeah, and also, like, try to break down the interview into multiple days. Try to add some water breaks in between. Like, I think, like, this work could help you as well.